Okay, I think that'll do. We're 1 minute past, so let's kick off so we've got enough time. So look, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Results National Grassroots Conference Call for February. If we've got anybody new on the call, very warm welcome to you. Good to see you. If we haven't met, my name's Aaron Oxley. I'm the Executive Director here at Results UK. Is there anybody else who is actually new on the call that wants to introduce themselves, particularly if you've not been on before, just to say hello? Give us a chance to welcome you.
Oh, hi, it's Vinita. I'm joining in from Sheffield.
Great.
And it's my first time to join this call.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us from Sheffield. That's wonderful. Would anybody else like to say hi? Everybody else is a veteran. Okay, great. All right, very good to have you all. And as always, I think I'm going to start the call with a quick overview of what's going on in the world and in politics that's going to affect our work here at Results to overcome global poverty. So we'll kick straight into that. Unfortunately, the first thing I have to talk about this evening is Brexit. Speaking completely in my personal capacity, I'm actually really sad that this has happened. And I do think it's going to be very bad for Britain. I think it's going to be bad for our standing in the world. And I suspect quite a few people on this call might have similar views. But there are also going to be people on this call who don't share that view and who are thinking more about the opportunities that Brexit could bring in terms of trade, in terms of setting our own rules. But what's really important for us at Results is that whatever view that we start as staff or volunteers take as individuals, as Results, we continue to advocate for the things that are needed to bring about an end to global poverty in the new reality that the country faces. Whatever your own political beliefs, it's really clear that Brexit will have some implications for the way that the UK supports international development efforts around the world. For example, we now no longer have a say in how the European Union aid budget is spent, and that's the largest aid budget in the world. Similar challenges exist for spending on research and development and new tools to fight tuberculosis. That's one of our long-standing issues at Results. The UK currently puts a lot of money into research funds that are actually managed by the EU, much of which actually flow back to our world-class research organisations. And we may well need to do some advocacy work to persuade the government to ensure that that important work will continue. Now, in a democracy, we have to respect the choices that politicians and the public have made and move on, and to have faith in the systems and processes that exist in the UK. Our parliamentary system, the politically neutral civil service, the rule of law, the way budget cycles work, and so on. We must continue to engage in public discourse in order to argue for the changes that we want to see in the world to enable people to access their rights to health, education, and economic opportunities. That's just how advocacy works. And as Results, we know just how effective that can be. I don't need to remind most of you about the hundreds of millions of pounds we've helped the government release, even in just the last year, in very powerful interventions that'll help overcome poverty. What all this means is that we need to continue to engage with politicians of all the main political parties, regardless, as we always have. So as long as we can find common ground in our incredibly important mission to end poverty by 2030, then we will work together with them and speak out for the things that we collectively believe in. Now, both because we're a charity and therefore must be politically neutral, and because this is actually the most effective way that advocacy works, we're going to carry on engaging with a wide variety of MPs, including some who've been elected for the first time. Now, I know many of you have signed up to attend the Advocacy Day next week on the 12th of February in Westminster, and I wish you all the best of luck explaining to your MP why you support the life-saving work of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. We need as many MPs as possible from right across the political spectrum to know all about Gavi and to believe it's an important way to save lives and enable children to grow up healthy, productive members of society. So whatever your feelings are about politics right now, please do believe that your continued engagement with your elected MP really matters more than ever. Now this month, as Parliament has reassembled, the work of the all-party parliamentary groups is restarting too. Now these APPGs are the cross-party bodies that informally scrutinise the work of government and advise on policy. Now, Results supports the work of 4 of these groups, the APPGs on global TB, vaccinations for all, global education, and nutrition for growth. Now, as new enthusiastic MPs join these groups, our staff will be supporting them to increase their parliamentary engagement with these issues, just as you do when you start to interest your MP in the issues that you care about. More on the subject of scrutiny, one announcement we've heard just last week is that Parliament's International Development Committee, or the IDC, now has a new chair, Sarah Champion. She's a Labour Member of Parliament and is the member for Rotherham. Now, whereas APPGs are parliamentary mechanisms to informally hold government to account, the IDC is the one of the most important bodies that does that formally. The IDC scrutinises aid spending, not just the amount, but the quality and focus of the UK's international development efforts. We've already congratulated Sarah on her appointment, of course. We actually already know her quite well. And in fact, a couple of years ago, she came with us on a trip to Uganda to learn about vaccination. So we hope she's going to be a really good ally for results issues. The International Development Committee and all of the APPGs must have members from all of the main parties. So we're going to be reaching out to a bunch of other MPs in due course. We're going to put a link in the chat box to an article that Sarah wrote in Politics Home, which she writes about why she cares about international development. And in fact, she actually mentions her visit to Uganda, so have a read and look out for that. On a more worrying note, we are continuing to hear rumours about a potential cabinet reshuffle and a risk to the existence of the Department for International Development, which, as most of you know, is internationally renowned for the quality and breadth of the work that it does. And quite apart from the good that it achieves in the world, it's really a big part of the UK's reputation internationally as a major player on the world stage. We're hearing constant noise from certain politicians in the media that the UK is spending too much on international development. And as a result, we're very clear that we oppose this position. We need to keep our commitment to spending 0.7% of our national income on aid, and that this very small percentage, invested wisely, as DFID demonstrably does, has an absolutely huge impact and does not come at a cost to our own domestic services that we need here in this country. If you were able to take action on this following our last call where we discussed the importance of DFID remaining independent, a big thank you. And if you haven't been able to take that action, it's absolutely not too late. The recording of last month's call is available on our website where you can hear the discussion about why this matters. And of course, the basics are up on our website and last month's action materials. We're going to put a link to the chat box to that just now. This is really a live issue right now. The latest intelligence we have is that a reshuffle is coming perhaps next week. Thursday the 13th was mooted in the Sun over the weekend, for example. And that article also predicted a merger with the Foreign Office will happen. We hope they're wrong about that. They've been wrong plenty of times before. And so right now, every piece of evidence the government has that the public supports DFID's work and independence is absolutely vital. Every letter, every meeting with your MP, every comment on an online article, every one of your well-informed social media posts, they all matter. I'll leave it there. That's it for me right now. I'm going to hand over to Della as usual to give the roundup of all your advocacy activities around the UK in the last month. So over to you, Della.
Thank you, Aaron. So yeah, I'll just start with what Aaron mentioned about the Gavi Lobby Day. So that's happening next week on the 12th of February. Thanks so much for all the interest we've had from around the network. We're expecting to see 17 results advocates there on the day, including some brand new members, so that's really exciting. We'll hopefully all get to meet our MPs and get them to take action to ensure a strong UK pledge to Gavi this year. We are working with other organisations on this, including Save the Children, Global Citizen and the One campaign. So all in all, we're expecting hopefully to see 68 MPs there. So it'll be quite a crowd. Richard and Sophia from the London group are also organising a social for afterwards, which is open to anyone from results who'd be interested to join if you're in London or nearby. It's going to be at the Silver Cross pub, which is really close to Parliament, starting from about 5:30. Hopefully I'll have an Eventbrite link I can share with you soon. It's going to be sort of a casual social with potentially a Sustainable Development Goals quiz, so very exciting. Let me know if you're interested so that I can make sure we've got enough space for everyone. So in terms of campaign actions, Zoe in Manchester shared with me a really nice reply that her and some of her students got from Matthew Rycroft, who is DFID's most senior civil servant, on the November campaign action on the Gavi replenishment. It was really nice to hear him say that their priority will be to help ensure that Gavi has enough funding to reach out to the most vulnerable communities and children who have never been vaccinated. So thanks for sharing that, Zoe. It's also been really nice to hear from some of you who've been meeting with or writing to your MPs recently. I know the Linlithgow, Poole, Manchester, Macclesfield group have written to their MPs recently on the Gavi replenishment and on defending UK aid. I know Kathy in Edinburgh recently met with her MP Tommy Shepherd, and the advocates in London and Brighton are in the process of organising meetings as well, so really exciting times. I wanted to throw open and see if anyone wanted to share anything in terms of how their MP engagement has been going since the general election. No pressure. I can move on if nobody wants to take the floor. Okay, no worries. Oh, someone's coming off mute. Can't see who that is.
Off mute. Yes, so in Oxford, I wrote to. I wrote to our new. Well, she's not our new MP. She's our MP, Annalise Dodds, who regained her seat in the general election of 2019. Just about Gavi replenishment, and we have received a positive response from her before, so hopefully we'll again. That's it, really.
Thanks, Tiffany. Really nice to see you all in Oxford. Thanks for sharing. Let me know if you do get a response. I wanted to just mention as well that Karen in Macclesfield has been busy combating all the kind of negative energy and misconceptions surrounding UK aid on the internet again, this time in the Sun newspaper comment section, which is amazing. I'll share a link in the chat box so you can see her contribution. Also on the subject of communications, Layla, who is a Results London advocate, recently had her blog featured in a parliamentary briefing for the House of Lords debate on nutrition for growth, which just goes to show that it was a great piece of writing and a really useful bit of information for doing advocacy with. I'll put a link in so that you can see that as well. Lastly, I just wanted to flag a few key dates that we've got coming up for the network. So on Saturday, the 7th of March, we're going to be running a training day in London, where we want to launch some new thinking we've been doing about how our issues, so nutrition, infectious diseases, education, etc., intersect with each other, and how the climate emergency is feeding into that as well. So yeah, the training will focus on the need to work towards multiple sustainable development goals together, which lends itself quite nicely to working collaboratively with other local groups and how we can go about that as results. So hopefully we'll be covering that as well. I'll send an email out to everybody tomorrow with a link to sign up. We're also expecting to have 2 youth leaders for nutrition from Rwanda and Zambia join us for the training day. So that'll be a really nice opportunity for some advocate to advocate sharing. They're going to be in London until the 13th of March and potentially visiting other places in the UK as well. So we'll be sure to link you up with them as much as we can, and signpost any opportunities for you to hang out while they're here. So the last thing I wanted to mention is just the Results National Conference, which this year is going to be from the 6th to the 8th of June. For those of us who are new to the network, it's a 3-day event, which we put on every year for the network. We invite guest speakers for talks and workshops to help inspire you and equip you with new skills for your advocacy. The Monday is an advocacy day, so a rare chance to meet with different teams and parliamentarians to discuss the campaigns we're working on this year. So again, I'll have an event page up and running for you soon, hopefully, but save the date. So yeah, just drop me an email if you've been taking any actions and not mentioned it, so that I can shout you out on the next call and know what's going on. So thanks as always for all your hard work. I will pass back to Aaron.
Thanks, Stella. Thanks for that. That really is one of my favourite parts of the whole call, where I get to hear about all the sensational stuff you've all been doing, recap the things you've sent into the office that we've all collectively been looking at, marvelling about, and quite often dancing around. You know, it's you guys give us so much energy with everything that you do. So look, onto the topic of tonight's call. We're going to hear from a real expert on the subject of nutrition. It's someone that we know very well, and we've worked really very closely with as part of our wider Results Global Action family, the Action Global Health Advocacy Partnership. I've noticed that she's been lurking in our call since the very beginning, but let me introduce her. It's really my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of Results Canada, Chris Dendies. Now, Chris and I have worked closely together for many years.
Don't say it out loud.
Okay, not so many, but quite a few years. We're part of in addition to being a member of the Global Results family, Chris and I, Results Canada and Results UK are part of the Global Action Global Health Advocacy Partnership. That's 15 organisations from around the world in both donor and high burden countries. We work together on a bunch of different health advocacy, particularly nutrition, child health, immunisation, tuberculosis. Some of the countries, I'm probably missing some out, so if you're listening to the recording and you're from one of those countries, I apologise. Canada, UK, USA, Australia, Korea, Japan, South Africa, Kenya, Zambia, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, India, France, Italy, and a satellite office in Brussels to keep the pressure on the EU. Now, Chris, she's been a real long-term advocate on nutrition, as well as being an expert on the issue for Results. She took some time away from Results for a while and went to work for Nutrition International. Now, they're a major player in the world of global nutrition programs and nutrition advocacy. They're based in Ottawa. And she's also a board member of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health, and is a board member of the Canada Partnership for Women and Child Health, and is just generally a really lovely person. So Chris, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you on the call tonight. Thank you for being with us, even though it's a mid-afternoon for you in Ottawa, so it's technically office hours, which means that you've given up probably some important work meeting or meeting with a Canadian parliamentarian to share your expertise on nutrition with our network. So thanks so much for that. You're on a call with a committed group of volunteer advocates and campaigners from all over the country, from Scotland to the South Coast. Some of whom have been active on global poverty issues for decades, and some of whom, as you heard, are brand new tonight and new to Results. But they're all united by a passion to make a difference, and all pretty keen to hear from you what we can do on all of that. So as we do with every guest speaker, I'm going to ask you to say just a couple of words about yourself and what you do with Results Canada. And then if you're able to say a little bit about what got you into this work and what motivates you to work on nutrition advocacy particularly. And I don't know if you want to say a couple of words about Results Canada, how it's similar or different than what you're experiencing tonight. I think that would probably be quite interesting too. Chris.
Thank you, Aaron. And I can't tell you, this is my favorite moment of the day, if not the week, if not the month. This is really exciting. And as Aaron said, so I'm the Executive Director of Results Canada. I'm an old family friend, though. I've been affiliated with Results since 2006, and I was the ED between 2006 and 2011, whereas Aaron said I left to go work for an implementing organization to kind of get my feet wet, I guess, in that environment. Found myself there for 7 years, and a couple of years ago, was looking around, and Results was looking for an ED again. And I have to tell you, through a long circuitous route, I ended up just falling in love with this organization, an organization that I'd never not fallen in love with before. Actually, I'd always had a long time relationship all over again. And I guess the thing that kind of draws me to Results is, it's just, I realized, having been away, even though I was still kind of volunteering and whatnot, that one of the reasons I love it is it's just, I'm inspired by the opportunity to advocate for big impact. I'm inspired by the opportunity for Results, not to be advocates for ourselves, but for the biggest impact initiatives in the world. And frankly, I'm inspired by all of you. So I'm inspired by our volunteers. And so in Canada, we have a model that's very similar to Results UK. We have grassroots volunteers across the country. We also have, regular calls. We take monthly actions. And what I think is really empowering and inspiring about this Results International family is, as I was listening to you talk about the actions that you've been taking on Gavi, on immunizations, on nutrition, we're also doing that. We just actually had our grassroots volunteers reaching out to parliamentarians to get them to make statements in the House around immunizations this month. So it's a real grassroots to global movement. And when you think about yourself whether you're in London or Leeds or wherever you might be, connected to folks in Calgary or Toronto or Montreal that are also taking action on these global issues for our own domestic governments, but also pushing for big change. You know, there's nothing really that beats that. So that's what really inspires me, and that's who I am, and that's what brought me back. So thank you for letting me be here. I'm really appreciative.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that introduction and for sharing a little bit about your grassroots network as well. I should actually also mention that if anyone on this call is planning on attending the Results International Conference, it's in Washington, DC, this year, 20th to the 23rd of June. It's the 40-year anniversary of the Results Global family. You'll have, first of all, it's going to be an awesome party, but second of all, you'll definitely have the chance to meet some of our colleagues and those fellow advocates from Canada that Chris was talking about. Speak to Della or Naveed, fire them an email. Anyone in the office can help you out if there's something you might be interested in exploring. So look, we've heard a bit about Chris, about Results Canada. We're going to take the usual pre-arranged questions before we open it up to the floor. So please say, make sure you introduce yourself when you're giving a question. When we get to the open questions bit, you can, as always, type your questions into the chat box on the right or left of your screen. If you're on a computer, if you're on a phone and you'd rather text in your question, the number tonight is 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178. And we'll also do the usual go off mute and yell out your name as well for those that who are otherwise defeated by technology. So we'll get to all of that. But we're going to go to our questions, the first one of which I believe is coming from Brighton. Do we have Brighton on the call?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? It's Hugh.
Yes.
Very well.
Great. Yeah, hi, I'm Hugh, I'm from Brighton. Thanks so much for your time, Chris. And my question is, we are still a long way from ensuring everyone has the nutritious food they need. How important is the Nutrition for Growth agenda for efforts to improve nutrition around the world?
Thanks for that question, Hugh. You know, I just a few words about Nutrition for Growth, and I know this is the focus of your advocacy this month and in the coming months, but it really is incredibly important, not only to ensuring we scale up our resources and our response to malnutrition, but because malnutrition has a direct impact on so many other areas. But for a number of years, and this is what I found when I worked in the nutrition space, nutrition, you know, often slipped through the cracks, right? It was everyone's problem because it contributes to so many other kind of determinants or impacts related to poverty and to health, and really nobody's issue. But finally in 2013, just to give you a little bit of the history, the UK really stepped up and hosted the first ever, what was called the Nutrition for Growth Summit, which is what you're going to be talking about again in terms of coming up in 2020. And it brought together, it was the first of its kind, it brought together 100 stakeholders, including donors, the number of donors, and they came together and they endorsed a global Nutrition for Growth compact, and we were very involved in it in my executive, you know, space at Nutrition International. But it actually achieved, it was successful. There was $4 billion that was pledged at that conference for nutrition-specific interventions, for fortification or supplements, the kind of nutrition interventions that can have a direct impact, and another $19 billion pledged for what's called nutrition-sensitive initiatives. So those are the areas that touch on malnutrition or touch on nutrition, but they're not necessarily a specific causal pathway in terms of nutrition outcomes. So think of things like, to make it real, water and sanitation. You know, you can have, if you're already suffering from poor nutrition and you're trying to do something about it, or you've got a system that's trying to support you, and yet you have access to dirty water and unsafe sanitation, you're a kid and you get diarrheal disease, then the nutrition benefits that you're getting from the system are just kind of literally, you know, seeping out. So nutrition sensitive, a big commitment to nutrition sensitive and nutrition direct interventions. And then and it was really important just to highlight that first Nutrition for Growth conference and around the beginning of that time, because it was really about accountability. It was ensuring that pledges were above baseline. So in other words, it wasn't just a big party where everybody came together and said, this is what we're already doing. Aren't we great? A clap for us, which we know that donors sometimes try to get away with, and that's why Results doesn't let them. It was really showing that there was a pledge that was above baseline that was going to have a real significant impact. Since then, there's been two other ones, one in Rio, one in Milan. Their impact has been less clear. The first one was tied to the Olympics, so these have also been tied to various moments like that. But I will say that nutrition is really unique because there's no multilateral organization to invest in. So when we're fighting for resources for Gavi, we're basically saying, write your check here, donors, write it to Gavi or the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria. Nutrition doesn't have one global fund. It's a multiplicity of entry points. So their contributions to the Nutrition for Growth conference are cumulative. So Canada will provide bilateral support. It might write a check to Nutrition International, which is a Canadian organization. The UK might write a check to, some country governments or initiative related to that. So that it becomes a little bit murky and a little bit harder to track to ensure that those investments are real, but nevertheless incredibly important because it is really the one key opportunity. So fast forward to this year, 2020, and the Nutrition for Growth Summit is happening in Japan. The big summit is in December. We can get into the details, I think, in a second about sort of what's coming up this year. But there's real hope that this one will be real and genuine because really, frankly, we are on the launching ground to the next 10 years will either have us achieve the 2030 SDGs or not. It'll either be jet fuel or brakes because the investments that we make over the next 3 to 5 years are going to be implemented by then. So this is a real sort of success or fail kind of year. And I think that everybody is seeing this as a big opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. Great answer. We are going to jump straight into our second question because I think that follows on quite well. It's almost as if we pre-prepared them. That question's going to come from Sturt Valley. Do we have someone from Sturt Valley able to ask the question?
Yes, Corinne here.
Hi, Corinne.
In spite of my screen saying Gareth, I'm impersonating my husband. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Great to hear from you. I just wanted to know that with the Global Nutrition Summit in December, what is the relevance of the pledging moment in July, and what are donor countries expected to do at that particular point, the pledging moment?
And that's a great question, right? Because we've got double the fun this year. We've got these two kind of key moments. And, again, happy for Aaron or others on the call to leap in. But my understanding just is that first in July, alongside the Olympics, which, as I said, the original N4G was alongside the Olympics. It was kind of pegged to that. There's been traditionally, an event tied to the Olympics. So Japan is going to host an international pledging moment for donors in July. And then second in December, Japan is going to host this broader Global Nutrition Summit. So the July event is meant to be, they didn't want to put all their eggs in one basket, frankly. I think that's my take on it. And the July event is meant to be almost a springboard for the second. Some of the countries that will get invites to this pledging conference in July, where there's going to be a lot of focus, are countries like Canada, frankly, that's been a big nutrition contributor. And also the UK will be definitely one of them. I know that that's a hope on the part of the organizers. It's a hope on part of civil society. Having a couple of big donors come out in advance, show the way. That's why it's so important that we get significant investments at that July conference. Create kind of a launch pad for something bigger or something else in addition in December. It really just sends a signal. So it sets a signal on the level of ambition that's expected, and it sets a signal on donors sort of stepping up and taking this all seriously. So really, it's all just to help ensure 2020 is a big year for nutrition.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We're now going to pop over to Manchester in the middle of the country for question 3.
Hey, it's Hunter from Manchester.
Hi, Hunter. Hi.
Right. Good nutrition in childhood is important for a person's long-term prospects. So, how can we ensure that those nutrition programs are geared towards helping us achieve our wider health goals?
So you guys saved I saw these questions. I'm looking forward to the questions that are going to also, be impromptu, but I saw these questions. I think this is a really tough question, but a really interesting one. So I don't have all the answers because I'm not a nutritionist, and it's a really multifaceted, response, but it made me think about it, and I was happy to. So just a couple of thoughts. So how can we ensure nutrition programs are geared towards really helping achieve wider health goals? In other words, I think it's like, how can we ensure that nutrition programs are successful, that they have real impact in the world? Because I will say that nutrition is hard. That's one thing I'm going to say. Nutrition is not like and immunization. And I'm not saying immunizations are easy, because it there's a whole health system that's involved. But nutrition is not a shot, get the cohort kind of vaccinated, and then come back in 6 months or a year or 2 years. It's an everyday thing, because you ingest nutritious foods. If you're severely, or if you're malnourished, it's a daily part of your life. And so whether it's therapeutic or whether it's just ensuring people have healthier food, it's something that has to happen every day. So it's not easy. That's one thing I'll say. So it's just to recognize that, and that in part that's because malnutrition can too often be invisible. Where I worked, because we did a lot of work around fortifying foods with nutritious, micronutrients, or providing supplements like vitamin A. So a lot of kids are very vitamin A deficient. It's vitamins and minerals. They're vitamin A deficient. And so some of the work that we did in the organization that I was at was that vitamin A deficiency would create an environment where kids were more susceptible to other illnesses like measles or other diseases or illnesses that could kill them. So the vitamin A might not kill them, but they would be susceptible and weakened in terms of their immune system to other things. But literally 2 cents a capsule of vitamin A twice a year, every 6 months, kind of looks like a polio vaccine. You squeeze it into a child's mouth, and it gives them this like hyper boost of vitamin A, kind of like a protection. And it has literally been tied to being one of the leading success stories in terms of ensuring that children don't die of other things. But you wouldn't know necessarily to look at the kid that they're vitamin A deficient. Or when you think about malnutrition, sometimes you think about severe acute malnutrition. I agree. That's the flies buzzing around faces sort of image that you see on too many sort of Sunday commercials and documentaries. That exists, and that has its own sort of necessity of treatment and protocols. But malnutrition in its invisible sense and its hidden hunger sense really is insidious, and it evidences itself in things like stunting. So children, there's 1,000 days from the time a woman gets pregnant to the first 2 years of life. It's called the 1,000-day window. Children who do get the proper nutrition, moms who are not getting the proper nutrition, who enter into pregnancy anemic, or their kids are just not healthy, they come out already sort of weakened. If by the time they get to the first 2 years of life, if they don't have the nutrition that they need, they often, will appear short for their age, stunted, right? Small in stature, that's what stunting is. But really stunting is a proxy for inequity, because these kids, a door closes in terms of opportunity. Their cognitive function, their ability to ward off diseases, everything is weakened. So they're starting the race, the human race, the race of life, like, 20 miles back. And, there's I don't know what the number is, I think it's 149 million kids globally that are stunted. So I think just to recognize that following up on answer to your question, the nutrition programs have to recognize that it is hard. Malnutrition is often too invisible, but there are these cost-effective, tangible solutions like vitamin A, like anemia for women who are severely anemic, iron and folic acid for women who are severely anemic, and a whole sort of continuum of care around the life cycle that make those programs much more high impact. I should just leave by saying, maybe reinforcing this notion, and happy to kind of further comment on this, but it's important to recognize too that better nutrition in itself is an outcome, but it's also this gateway to opportunity. So when I'm thinking about the work that we do to really ensure that kids aren't malnourished, that adolescent girls before they enter pregnancy aren't malnourished, that malnourishment is not an issue that we should be contending with, because we know what to do and we have the solutions and the impact, that it's not just about improving somebody's nutrition status. At NI, we used to like to say that we make a difference because nutrition is the difference. It is the difference between attending school and learning there, because it has such an impact on educational attainment and capacity. It's the difference between giving birth to a child and giving her life. In other words, so that she's not starting the race, miles back. It's the difference between fighting a disease and surviving it, because poor nutrition really undermines your capacity to beat those other sort of illnesses and diseases that attack the body, and really between what could be and what never gets the chance to be. And so it's really about opportunity, and it's really about impact. And so, I mean, I'm really thrilled that you're all kind of taking this on this month. And I think that N4G is our chance to really make a difference. So let's take it on only like results volunteers can do.
Thanks, Chris. What a great way to finish up the pre-prepared questions and kick straight into the wider discussion. We have plenty of time tonight, which is very good. I know I have loads of questions I'd like to ask you. I know there are probably plenty of people on the call that have some questions to ask you. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I have had one come in via SMS. So we're going to start with that. It's actually from Macclesfield. Do you want to read out your question, Macclesfield? You can go off mute and do it, or I can do it. I actually think it follows on quite well. Not hearing you, I'll just go ahead and ask it. So Macclesfield asks, Chris, what are the most important nutrition programs in what countries for what reasons?
What are the most important nutrition programs in what countries and for what reasons? You know, it's really interesting because there's a lot of stunting and malnutrition in Southeast Asia and Asia, in part because of diet, in part because of poverty, in part because, you know, people are often vegetarian. They might not get the protein from meat sources or, you know, the same sort of diets that we have. So there is clusters of malnutrition in either very low-income countries, you know, across sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere, and through Southeast Asia. But you know, obviously some countries are taking care of their own issues and other countries need some support. So it's really, it's a global issue. It's a global challenge and it's a global problem. There's malnutrition actually in every country in the world, frankly, because malnutrition is typically defined not just as undernutrition, which I've been speaking to it, but also increasingly globally overnutrition. So in other words, you know, being heavier and being malnourished is not necessarily about being underweight. It's also about being overweight. And that's actually in every country in the world. Obviously, the interventions and the approaches are very different based on where you are. But one thing I will say is that we've typically focused on undernutrition in impoverished or poorer countries where there is a necessity and a need to ensure that, you know, a young population is getting the nutrition, the nutrients that they need, and they don't have the resources there to kind of make it happen.
Okay, thank you, Chris. This is Macclesfield. We've finally connected, so thank you very much for your talk, and thanks for the answer to the question. I think I've got somewhere in the back of my brain that there's a definition of nutrition, or what, you know, part of the multifactorial definition of extreme poverty, with a certain number of calories per day. And that if you happen to be, you know, like a rickshaw driver in New Delhi, you probably need 5 times that number of calories just to do your job. Or if you are presumably a farmer in some part of sub-Saharan Africa, that's a really physical job. So, you know, perhaps our figures for extreme poverty and malnutrition are not kind of context sensitive enough. I just wondered if that fed into how you prioritize programs.
Yeah, I think one thing I just want to say though is that calories are not really, when I'm talking about malnutrition in the way that I'm talking about it, about hidden hunger, calories it really is about nutritional quality of the foods and a diversified diet. So for example, in some places, if you can, and you can imagine this, so just picture it, you're maybe you're in a rural area in I don't know, Nigeria or someplace, or in Southeast Asia, somewhere in Bangladesh, and you've got, you know, a mom who's you know, trying to feed her kids on less than $1 a day, and she's got a cook pot, and the cook pot may have rice in it, but just rice. And what happens is young kids, particularly really young kids, when it's so critical that they get the nutrients for their brains and their bodies to develop and grow and all of that, they just really get a smaller portion of the bowl. They just get a smaller portion of food. But what's missing is so the calories aren't what really matters. The calories can fill bellies, but what we say is in terms of malnutrition, the important to think it's the quality of the food. And that's why the interventions related to nutrition are not only about diversified diets, ensuring that people have access to kind of a healthy range of food, but also why you see organizations like GAIN, which is a global nutrition organization that is all about fortifying foods with nutrients. So when you look at your bread bag or your milk bag, in England, and you see all the vitamins and minerals that are on the back of it that it's been fortified with. What we try to do globally is fortify staple foods. Like when you iodize salt, you put iodine in salt because iodine deficiency is a massive problem among the poorest populations. In the staple foods, fortification is one entry point, or supplements like iron folic acid to treat anemia, or the vitamin A supplements, as I was telling you about. So I just wanted to say that you're right. Probably people need different caloric counts and protein and energy and all of that based on sort of what they do for a living. Obviously, when you're malnourished, you're not learning and you're not earning to the potential that you could because you're weakened systems, literally not only biological systems, but weakened systems in terms of family, community, country, and it goes on and on from there. It has a ripple effect.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's really helpful. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So we've had a flood of questions come in on the chat. Well, two. So let's take the second one first. This is from Hugh down in Brighton. I assume that's what the chat says, at least anyway. If Hugh's impersonating someone else, I apologise. Hugh asks, how does Nutrition for Growth develop infrastructure, both in terms of national health systems and agricultural and supply infrastructure? I think a good opportunity to unpack what Nutrition for Growth is and sort of how it works, maybe.
Yeah, so as I alluded to, it's really Nutrition for Growth is a moment. I mean, there is a website, you can look at it, but correct me, Aaron, because you might, I think Callum's on the call too. He's a real nutrition expert. Callum Northcott, who's a revered staff member that I adore in Results UK. It's a moment, it's a pledging conference. It's where people put investments. It is not, other than being accountable in terms of ensuring that those investments are directed towards nutrition, and that I hope that they're real investments, that they're above baseline. It does not articulate exactly which infrastructure or which organization those investments need to flow to. The better and the higher impact, is critical. But there are organizations that we know have big impact, like Nutrition International, like GAIN, like others. But there are also sort of health, national systems, governments that develop their own country level nutrition plans that actually all donors should be kind of contributing to and funding, because in a lot of places, obviously they're closest to home and they know what they're doing. But it's everybody doing this work, from UNICEF to the World Food Program, that actually does not only nutrition work in Imagine in refugee camps, the kind of staples that are provided for long-term settings where people are there for 20 years, fortified foods there. So it's a multiplicity of entry points. So it's a difficult question to answer, because Nutrition for Growth doesn't really dictate an infrastructure or where it should go. It just calls for high impact investments in sources that donors identify.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, while you were talking, I put in the chat a short chat with a little bit of commentary that links people to the actual outcome document from the Nutrition for Growth event that was held in London in 2013. If you've got a second to click through to that and take a look, you can actually see the kind of commitments that were made. Some of them are quite specific, some of them quite vague. Callum, actually, who's on the call that Chris mentioned, has actually been working very closely with the government of Japan and a bunch of other nutrition stakeholders from around the world to help develop the accountability leg of this whole event, so that when the pledges come in Tokyo, that they're going to be good pledges, they're going to be measurable, they're going to be trackable, they're going to have impact. We might, Callum, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. If you want to jump on. Yeah, there you are, you're unmuting. Go for it.
Hi. Yeah, I can, very quickly. I've been lurking, listening since the call started. So learning a lot, Chris, as always, from you. I think actually, Aaron, it's a really nice segue, because in terms of N4G's role to develop infrastructure, exactly as Chris articulated, it's not really, it depends on the individual commitments. But one thing that we are able to do is to hopefully develop some global nutrition infrastructure to ensure that the summit is successful and the commitments are meaningful. And so, as Chris alluded to, for N4G in 2013, we were really keen to ensure that new commitments aren't just repackaged old commitments, that there's absolutely brand new money which is going to go out and target new people that aren't being reached with the services that they need. And so, yeah, as Aaron said, we've been working closely with the government of Japan on designing what that will look like. Some of you may have already seen or be familiar with the Global Nutrition Report, which is due to launch in a few months' time. So we've been working very closely with them on identifying the best way forward. So expect, hopefully, if it all gets pulled off correctly, to see some new commitments above baseline, multi-year, and really targeting the hardest and the furthest to reach. That's been the drive of us and the colleagues we've been working with for the last few months on that.
Thanks, Callum. Great intervention. I'm going to jump straight over to the latest question in the chat because I think it's going to be, it's a good one to hear from Chris. And I'm sure you've read it, Chris, but I'll read it out loud for those on the phone. It says, and it comes from, sorry, who's it from? Results? Oh, it's from someone in Results, I think. I don't quite know who. Maybe you, Della, was that you? Anyway, Chris, do you have a favorite fact or story you tell people when you're trying to explain how nutrition is vital for ending poverty and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? Or was there like a wow moment for you personally in realizing the importance of nutrition?
So many wow moments, but I have one that I'll share with you that for some reason when I saw this, it kind of stood out. I will first say that so many of my wow moments have just been, you know, one time the organization did a lot of work on salt iodization. So that's putting iodine in salt, which, as I said earlier, is a staple food. And actually iodine deficiency is a huge problem among the poorest populations, causing goiters, causing neurological defects in kids, all of that stuff. And I was in this, I have two stories. One is real grounded and one is another story I'll share. But this first story, so I'm in Bima, Indonesia, and, you know, I've taken like 3 planes to get there. And we're looking at visiting one of the programs that is literally community-based where they're iodizing salt. And this is how they did it. They had these, there's an island, and they had these like flats that they would, that would fill with salt water when the tide was higher. And these flats of water would fill with salt water, and then they would like pump them out into concentrated, like concentric, you know, smaller and smaller pools. So the salt became really, really concentrated. And then they would, are you following me? Or is it, so basically the salt water, they would pump it through bicycle pumps to like smaller and smaller like pools. So the heat of the sun would evaporate the water and they'd be left with these salt flats, right? Then they'd rake the salt. And what we did as an organization is we had this salt grinder that you'd put the salt in, because when salt comes out, it's all like rough and thick and all of that. And the beauty of the salt grinder is it would grind it. While it was grinding it, iodine just gets sprayed on it. It's literally pennies per massive impact in terms of this particular intervention. And it would, in the process of grinding the salt and making it better and better for production, they would add the iodine, which we help provide, package it in a co-op, and then sell it. So it had this multiplier impact in terms of just health benefits for the population that got the iodized salt, but also this economic return on investment too, which was really cool. And I think in some of the flats that still had water, they were even like harvesting fish. So the genius of the people in that community just to kind of get everything out of this like multifaceted greatest global health story was pretty exciting and inspiring to see. That's one. The second story that I'll share is I had an opportunity because she was on the Nutrition International board, but also we just got to know each other. And she was at a Results International conference actually a couple of years ago, putting in another plug, as Erin had done, to go, because really cool people go there. But Joyce Banda is the former president of Malawi, only the second female prime minister or president in head of state in Africa. But she was on the board. And she told me this story, Joyce Banda. Now, when she was a sitting president in Malawi, she tells me this story about how she is in, you know, the breakfast room, And, you know, the houseboy, as she put it, came in and put an egg down in front of her husband. And she looked at him and said, "Where's my egg?" And he said, "Well, there was only one egg left." And she was thinking, I'm the president and he gets the egg. And then she said to me, "You know, Chris, in my country," but this is true of countries around the world, women kill the chicken, they pluck the chicken, they cook the chicken, and then they serve it to their husbands and sons. And then they're left with the bones. They and their daughters are left with the bones. And it just made me realize that women in too many places often eat least and last, and that's also a part of this equation in this story. And the reason I'm telling this story is because it is not just about a thing that you put in your body. It is not just about, you know, health status. It also, there's all this other stuff tied into it. And in this case, you know, nutrition can also be sexist because it is about resources and it's about old gender norms. And I always thought that her story was really interesting and high impact because it resonated with me, and it really helped drive home the fact that nutrition isn't just nutrition. It's actually an entry point to conversing about a whole bunch of other things and related to the question about poverty, about inequity, and about injustice.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, yeah, that's a phenomenal story. The president doesn't get the egg. You know, like, what more? How
she
more
fired him,
powerful?
by the way. Did say that. I just smiled and nodded, but anyway.
Well, exactly. But I mean, it is a very powerful image. Thank you so much for sharing that. We've got 8 minutes and a couple of questions to get to, and I know how this works. I'm going to get a whole bunch with 1 minute to go, and it's going to be really awkward. But anyway, 8 minutes to go. Will we see food companies from the private sector have an input into the Nutrition for Growth Summit?
I would say, I mean, if Callum has a different answer, he can leap in, but yes, the private sector is a part of the nutrition story. It has to be. If you think about the reach of food companies, or the biggest companies in the world, they produce food, they have the opportunity to actually produce good food or crappy food. And so, you know, in the nutrition space, there's often been an effort to try to get private sector companies to ensure that, you know, they're contributing to the solution and not part of the problem, particularly when it comes to overweight and that kind of malnutrition. So, you know, there's often been challenges related to some of the bigger food companies, and I'm talking about like Nestle and others that have a history of marketing, you know, breast milk substitutes, when the best food security system in the world is breastfeeding, like, you know, exclusive breastfeeding for at least the first, you know, 6 months or a year. But I think there is a real effort to try to engage, and there are some really great private sector companies that are doing really good stuff. So,
thanks, Chris. Callum, do you want to weigh in on that, or should we jump on to the next question?
Can I just add to that? I just want to say this.
Yeah.
I've often thought in terms of the private sector engagement in this space that I like the zombie approach to private sector collaboration when it comes to these food companies. And by zombie approach, I mean, I want their brains. Like, they can provide money, but if you think about it, I went sent the CEO at the time of Nutrition International to a conference. It was all these, because he was a food scientist. He was a big expert in food fortification. And there are all these people that work for all these big food companies, food scientists, and their whole job every day was to make purple taste more like grape. You know what I mean? To like figure out how to make food for us more palatable, or, you know, all of this sort of stuff. And I felt like if we could, or I feel like if they would just contribute their brains, their lab space, their power to actually fortifying tea with iron, tea that most poor people drink, or triple fortifying salt, like adding not only, now they add iodine, iron, and other supplements to those staple foods that poorest populations, then we could really unlock something and have real impact in the world. So think the zombie approach to private sector collaboration, we want their brains.
Great. That image will stick with me. Thank you, Chris. We've got a great, we've got 5 minutes left. Let's take advantage of the fact that you're from Results Canada and unpack a couple of those questions as well to round the call out. So look, two questions came through on, you know, Results Canada. One was around what do you think what do you see the main differences being between Canadian results and Results UK? especially in terms of volunteers, grassroots volunteers, what you guys do that might be different than what we do, and bearing in mind you had just a slice of it tonight. But then also, do you have any nutrition specific goals? I like the phrasing of that question. Any nutrition specific goals for Results Canada this year, and how are you planning to measure your impact?
We do. So I've seen your action sheets, and our campaign is, and our ask of the government, the Canadian government, is to step up and increase its investment in nutrition. So again, it's hard because it's not just like writing a check to Gavi or the Global Fund. We've analyzed the baseline, and our ask is 800 million Canadian dollars. I think that's what it is. Over 3 years, because our aid budget is smaller. That's another fight that we have. We're stuck at 0.26. We're not even close to 0.7. So Trudeau's not all that. But anyway, on results, you know, it amazes me, and I've spent time with results volunteers in the US and across Canada, and I'm just having this opportunity now and just loving it, how similar results volunteers are. And we've just done some like branding work and thinking here about new tools, new models, new ways to expand our reach in attracting young people, all of that sort of stuff. And one of the things I think that really stands out for me is I actually like the idea that we don't need 1 million people, although, you know, 1,000 would be nice. But I love the fact that, at least this is true of Results Canada, we ask a lot of our volunteers and they step up. And so it really is about going deep. It is about that kind of the two parts of the results mission. One is to create the political will to have impact. The other one, that we should be more overt and yell from the rooftops, is about empowering individuals to see that they can make a difference in the world. So that is common from my experience to results volunteers from Australia to the UK to Canada and elsewhere in the US. Here we have a very similar model to yours. So people do meet together in, we call them education and action meetings. So they get together in community centers or in their, you know, living room once a month. They kind of get together in a physical space. But increasingly, we're having more online groups. We're playing with, you know, the US has modeled this, but free agents. So in other words, our problem is our country is so vast. We get somebody from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan saying, I want to volunteer, but our only opportunity for them to volunteer at that point was join a group or form one. And that was almost, we'd like to get them there through the ladder of engagement, but so we're kind of we're trying to create new opportunities with the end result just being impact in the world and lighting people up to the fact that there are hope and solutions and they can make a difference. But right now for us, everything is on the table because our numbers of, you know, our volunteer growth is not what I want it to be, because I want more people to be as excited as I am and as all of you are, and to see how this can change their lives.
Thanks, Chris. Great answer, and a great way to round out the call. I was just typing in the chat box to give. Oh, hang on. It looks like we've got a question from Lithgow. Was that you, Ben?
Yes. Sorry, Aaron. Two very quick questions to Chris. The first one, does GM play a big impact in food and nutrition in developing countries? Maybe companies trying to push that. The second question, Chris, since you're heading Canada results, there's rumours here that DFED and the Foreign Office is going to merge. What's been your experiences when your DFED and your Foreign Office merged some years ago? Positive, negative.
And in 60 seconds or less, Chris,
yeah.
Sorry.
So the GMO's answer is complex, and I really don't have a good answer for you. I mean, it depends on how you define the GMO piece. I mean, there's some great organizations that are called Harvest Plus that are doing what some people might define as GMOs, but they're not. It's just about kind of creating a green revolution kind of, and more nutritious foods from the ground up. So I'm afraid I don't have that answer for you. You're going to have to kind of bug Callum. Maybe he can kind of dig some stuff up, and he's smiling. I put him on the spot, but he is a pretty cool person. So on the next question. So a couple of years ago, what was called CEDA at the time, which is the Canadian International Development Agency, which is now called the Global Affairs Canada, it did merge. It kind of merged with immigration and foreign affairs and the development organization. There's still a minister, so I guess you guys, we still have a full slated minister. It's still a full slated department. It still has a full, Treasury Board submit. All of the stuff that's related to kind of keeping it accountable is still independent. So I have to be frank with you, I haven't seen a massive change. The battles that we're fighting, would we be still fighting them if it was an independent, completely independent ministry related to like just our ODA levels? I don't think so, because for us, that fight has to happen at the Prime Minister's office and in the center with some powerful cabinet colleagues and cabinet ministers. So, but I do think that for DFID, particularly with the amount of resources and its, its footprint in the world and the impact that it has, Erin is completely right in saying that, you need to be watchful and mindful of that kind of happening, because it could be a slippery slope.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks.
Great. Look, we're 1 minute over. I want to be really respectful of people's time, so I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to have to call the call to a close. Sorry about that. I want to finish by saying a really big thank you to Chris for sharing her, not just her expert knowledge of nutrition, but also her enthusiasm, not just for the what of nutrition, but for the how of results, and what we're all going to go off and do over the next few hours and days. I really hope that many of you are going to be able to take this month's advocacy action that was emailed to you at the end of last week. You can find it on our website as well. This time, we're asking you to write directly to the Secretary of State, Alok Sharma, to ensure a big UK commitment of resources to fighting malnutrition. Part of the reason we're writing to him is that, is the imminent reshuffle. And look, even if it happens soon, the UK government's strong historical support for nutrition must continue. And we're keen to make sure that message gets across, even if the personnel in government change. So fill up the mailbag. If Alok Sharma is no longer there, it will absolutely get to the next person. Some of you might decide they want to wait till after the reshuffle. That's your call. But really, I think, why not use that as an excuse to write twice? Please send things off soon, though, because the decision is pretty imminent. It could be, and we also don't know exactly when the UK's N4G commitment money will need to be signed off by whoever is in charge. So get in early and maybe get in twice. So look, thanks again, Chris. Thanks so much. Oh, hello. We've got some more folks from the office there. It's great to see you. Look, I think we need to go. So I've really enjoyed tonight's call. I hope everybody else here has as well. Good luck with all your advocacy actions this month. Look forward to seeing you all again on our next call, first Tuesday of the month as usual. It will be the 3rd of March. Good night from me. Enjoy the rest of your evenings and have a lot of fun. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.